A dar inicio a la conferencia magistral de la Semana Global del Emprendimiento Panamá 2020. Tenemos como invitado en nuestra conferencia magistral es John Rossman, que es el autor del bestseller Think Like Amazon o Piensa como Amazon, 50 ideas y medias para convertirse en líder digital. Think Like Amazon ofrece a los líderes empresariales el manual de estrategias sobre cómo innovar, crear cultura y tener éxito en las eras de los negocios digitales. Rossman también es socio gerente de Rossman Partners, una firma asesora de estrategia y mejora de operaciones. Es un experto en la elaboración e implementación de modelos y capacidades comerciales, innovadores y digitales. Antes de Rossman Partners, John fue ejecutivo de Amazon.com, donde destacó por lanzar el negocio del comercio electrónico y lideró el negocio de servicios empresariales. Queremos dar la bienvenida a la conferencia Piensa como Amazon, construyendo una cultura de innovación. Welcome, John Rossman. The screen is all yours.
Hi, thank you so much for the introduction and the opportunity to get to come talk to you today. So I was a leader at Amazon. I got to launch two businesses, the Amazon Marketplace, which today is over 50% of all units shipped and sold. That's third parties selling at Amazon. And then I also ran enterprise services. And after I left Amazon in late 2005, working with many of my clients, I started to see the impact of all the strategies and maneuvers and tools that we use at Amazon in making change happen. But my books and my work and this discussion are not about Amazon. This is about you and what you can take from a company like Amazon to help build a culture of innovation. Next slide. Perfect. So let's start off with what seems to be a simple question. What is innovation? Lots of great definitions, but the thing I think about when I think about innovation is it's really two attributes, and they're athletic attributes. And although they sound similar, they're actually distinctly different. The first attribute is the attribute of speed. If you think about what speed is about repetitive motion, doing something world-class, highly effective, highly repetitive. That's operational excellence in our organizations. The second attribute is the attribute of agility. Agility is the ability to sense and make change. This is our core capability to make change happen in the organization. And what you see from leading innovators is they need to be able to do both. They have to both operate at speed and they have to do it with agility. I don't think it's too big of a stretch to say that Amazon is an example of an innovative organization. They run a worldwide organization with excellent operations, and every year, in small ways and big ways, they're going to innovate. So what can we take from Amazon, learn from it, and apply into our own businesses? Let's talk about a few of the things from Amazon. So first, there's 14 leadership principles at Amazon. The first is called customer obsession. Leaders start with the customer and work backwards. They work vigorously to earn and keep customer trust. And although they pay attention to competitors, they obsess about customers. I think the most interesting word in that leadership principle is the word obsession. We could have used an easier word like customer focused or in touch with our customers, but instead we chose the word obsession. It's a very strong word. You know when you're around somebody who's obsessed with something, right? Think about one of your colleagues or friends who's obsessed with a sports team. What are they like? They seem irrational. They spend time, energy, money, resources in ways that to some of us who may not share that obsession maybe seem irresponsible. And that is exactly how Amazon expects others to see how they operate for the customer. So I always think about, well, how do you operationalize something like this? I think two key concepts. First is realize that it's everybody's job to understand, to deeply understand the customer, how the topic at hand is impacting the customer, and to lead with the customer perspective. And the second is start every discussion, start every email, start every meeting with who the customer is and why this topic impacts the customer. And if you do those little things over time, customer obsession becomes the common element across your organization. So we all know Amazon today. It's a 25-year-old company. It wasn't always the mammoth company it was, but they always had a long-term vision and the patience to let things develop. Bezos is on record of saying, just because I can evaluate some investments over a 7 or 8 year period allows me to make investments that my competitors can't. I think Amazon's real understated superpower is patience, letting things develop, letting capabilities develop, letting markets develop, trialing, keeping them small, and then at the right moment, scaling them up. So you have to understand, if you're truly going to be an innovator, it's not going to be a straight line, it's not going to be predictable, and it oftentimes takes a long time to develop into the full vision. Next slide, please. Perfect. So I love to talk about some of Amazon's true innovations. These are things that really change customer expectations, and they aren't the things that you're probably guessing I might talk about. Back in the early 2000s, we launched a number of true innovative capabilities. Free everyday shipping. We were the first retailer to sell a new item next to a used item on the same detail page. We were the first company to put authentic customer reviews on a detail page. And we were the first company with the business that I launched to have multiple sellers for the same product, creating competition that benefited the customer. What is it that all of these innovations have in common? Well, first is today they don't seem that innovative, right? These are now customer expectations. But at the time, they were not only innovative, but everybody said we were irresponsible, that it was unsustainable, that it wouldn't work. The traditionalists didn't want to advance. And that's really the next part of true innovation, which is you have to be willing to change traditions. You have to be able to change business models. And you're oftentimes going to have others saying, this isn't going to work. It's unsustainable. It's not the way things happen here. If you're going to innovate, you have to be ready for the naysayers to say those things about you. Next slide. Perfect. So, does anybody know what website you go to if you go to relentless.com? Well, you may have guessed it, but if you go to relentless.com, it actually resolves to amazon.com. It was an early name that Bezos considered for Amazon, but they keep that domain active today as a message to the organization. And that message is that we are going to be relentless about getting to perfection for those things that impact the customer experience and those things that impact cost and quality at scale, right? This is operational excellence. If you were to ask me, what do you remember most about your days at Amazon? It's about the constant conversation and development of our metrics. We were never done with our metrics. We spent more time debating how we were going to measure a new product or a new service as we would actually building or designing the new product or the new service. And we did this because we knew that if teams had the right metrics, that they would be able to have stronger ownership. They would be able to do the right thing without as much oversight, without as much governance, without as much bureaucracy. So think about your metrics. use those metrics not to demonstrate to yourself how great you're doing, but to show you where the noise is, where the imperfections is, where there's opportunities for improvement. That's what data and metrics are about, is about finding opportunities to make little improvements along the way, getting to operational excellence. Be relentless in using metrics in your business. Perfect. So this slide is a picture of a beta partnership. It didn't go to scale. It was a beta partnership in Germany between Amazon, DHL, and Audi. And what this partnership allowed a customer to do was to order an item, have it delivered to the trunk of their car without specifying where their car was, right? They'd order an item, the DHL delivery person would get the location and one-time electronic fob. They'd open up the trunk, put in the package, close the trunk, fob's disabled, customer gets a message. What a great customer use case, obvious use case, but only Amazon thought about it. What can we learn from a use case like this? The first is that the future of great customer experiences is oftentimes going to go between multiple products and multiple services, which means it's going to go across multiple enterprises. So we all have to get good at the things that enable cross-product, cross-service, cross-enterprise integrations, right? There's technical things, APIs, that have to be scalable and secure and performant. But there's also business and legal topics that we have to get very comfortable and very good at. So the future of great customer experiences are going to go across multiple products and services. Second point to take away from this is that while I'm sure the finance organizations at Amazon, at DHL, at Audi tried to build a business case justifying this expense, there's no way that business case could stand up against all the other initiatives and projects that are well understood. You're guessing at a scenario like this. We called these things bets. We're going to talk more about bets a little later here, but you have to recognize these are inherently really good ideas, but you can't put a business case together for it, right? If you only lead with business cases, you are going to skip over opportunities like this. So you have to, first of all, recognize them, that they're different than your well understood projects. The last thing to take away from this scenario is this, is that Amazon, a company that's famous for customer trust and great customer experiences, is not resting on its laurels. In big ways and small ways, they find ways to improve and reinvent the customer experience. And if they can do it, my guess is we can all do it. Next slide. Perfect. So if you haven't read the Amazon shareholder letters, I really encourage you to go read the Amazon shareholder letters. Jeff is trying to give away his secrets of how he thinks and how he invests and how he builds a company. In the 2015 shareholder letter, he starts with the line, "I believe we are the best place in the world to fail." Not too many CEOs would start their shareholder letter with a line like that. But he comes back right after that with the sentence, "Most large organizations embrace the idea of invention, but are not willing to suffer the string of failed experiments necessary to get there." The most important word in that sentence is the term experiments, right? We have to understand that innovation, agile innovation, failing forward, failing fast, is about deliberate experimentation. And that is what most large organizations don't understand, is that the learning is called failure. So find a different term other than failure, because that gets misconstrued, misunderstood with other types of failures. Let's talk about how do we actually build a system of experimentation in our organizations. Next slide. Perfect. So make the elephant dance. I think that there's lots of great processes. I know there are lots of great techniques, methodologies, approaches for having a system for your innovation. But I think in general, there are three core components. The first is thinking in bets. These are hypotheses. These are things that you think are good ideas, but you don't exactly know. State them as hypotheses. I believe X, right? If you think about and recognize that these are hypotheses, then that puts you into the experimentation mode. But you have to be deliberate about recognizing, when am I thinking a bet versus something that I understand really well. When you have your hypotheses, then you want to go into your agile processes, right? Test, experiment, learn. There's lots of great methodologies for this: minimally viable product, the Agile Manifesto, lots of different approaches. But what do they all share is that we learn by testing and failing. And what we have to do is try to accelerate our learning. So we need to keep our experiments, our incremental steps, as small as possible. But what happens at most large organizations is they get burdened with lots of other things, lots of other requirements, lots of other decision makers, lots of parties who can slow things down. You have to be deliberate in trying to keep these experiments small and fast, and then you learn from them. And that gets to the third part of this slide, which is a portfolio of investments. This portfolio simply measures risk versus potential benefit. And what most organizations are good at is the lower left-hand quadrant, right? Those are initiatives and projects and investments that we understand well. And if we execute well, we have a pretty good certainty on the type of payback we're going to have. What most companies are not good at is that upper right-hand quadrant, high risk, high reward. The key thing about the bets that are up in that quadrant is they have to be small. We have to be able to afford to let them fail and mature. Simply mapping out your investments in a matrix like this will help you recognize, where am I operating? Do I have any investments that are in that upper right-hand quadrant? You have to put those under a different governance, a different project management approach. Because if you try to manage those bets, those hypotheses, the same way that we manage our well understood projects, that lower left-hand quadrant, will squash them, because that type of approach doesn't work for small agile bets. But underneath all of this is the notion of, right? We're trying to learn as fast as possible. We're trying to experiment as fast as possible. So you truly have to think of a different type of management set of techniques and how we make decisions for these types of experiments than we do for our other types of businesses that we run. Next slide. Perfect. So get to yes. So at least here in the States, when you're a business owner trying to get a new concept, a new innovative idea working in your organization, there's lots of stakeholders who essentially say no all the time, right? It could be legal, could be tax, could be human resources, it could be supply chain, it could be any stakeholder organization. At Amazon, the mindset is for those partners to adopt a mindset of yes. Their job is to help the business idea get to yes. And that is what takes true expert opinion. It's easy to say no and to give all the reasons, but it takes a real collaborator, a real business partner, somebody who's committed to success to help a business owner get to yes. Simply creating the tone from the top that our job is to get to yes for all the things that are needed in order for a new idea to succeed. That's the job of our experts. Amazon does a great job within their support organizations of letting them know that their job is to help enable the business person to get to yes. I hope you're able to work with your organizations and your partners to adopt the yes mindset. Perfect. So again, back to Amazon shareholder letters. Jeff and Amazon for a long time have had this concept of being a day one organization. And the underlying meaning of that is that they believe that innovation in the internet has just started impacting the future, impacting businesses, impacting society, and that they are committed to being an organization that explores and invents in the future. So in the 2016 shareholder letter, Jeff explains, well, what's a day one organization versus a day two organization? And he outlines some of the key differences and what you can do. Well, a day two organization is an organization that is essentially trying to optimize for the current time period. And they're probably more interested in maintaining the status quo than investing in the future. So as I said, Jeff outlined a set of things that day one organizations do. And one of the things that a day one organization does is embrace external trends. These are perhaps the startups, the technical ideas, the trends that are really small. They sound like they probably won't work, but given the right time frame, being patient, they may impact a business and an industry in a very significant way. Jeff talks about one here, which is machine learning. There's different ones in every industry, but the whole point of this is recognize what are the small game-changing ideas and investments that are going on today. Educate yourself about them. Be curious about them. Read about them. Invite in experts. Invite in experts who don't agree with you relative to your opinion on this topic and learn from them. And if you do that as a consistent habit, then you'll recognize the point on when I have a hypothesis, when am I going to make a bet on this topic, and proceed in a very small way so that you learn and you take advantage of it. The whole goal here is to take advantage of the wave and not to be squashed by the tsunami. You do that by staying curious and learning about the future trends that it could impact your industry and your business. Next slide, please. So all of this really comes down to this topic of kind of speed and agility again, right? Speed is about operational excellence and really operating in today. Agility is really about thinking about the future and investing enough time and enough resources to truly create the future. And as Jeff points out here, he thinks his job is primarily working in the future. And that's where he pulls his lieutenants and his senior team to, is working in the future. And so I would just encourage you to be thoughtful about the effort, your personal time, your personal attention, your personal curiosity about the future, and how do you help create that future that is out there? Staying curious, figuring out your hypotheses and your bets, and then learning how you're going to experiment them. So let's talk about a new piece of the future from Amazon. Move forward, slide, please. So we're going to talk about a new product that Amazon just released. They gave us a short video that we can watch.
This is Zoe. Just like you, she uses lots of different cards and IDs to get through her day. What if all Zoe needed
Perfect. So I think that's such a great example of a small bet. Amazon is going to be patient with it, let it mature, let the market mature, and always focusing on removing kind of customer friction, right? Little things like making payments and identification easier. So earlier I talked about, the need to have a process, a system for how you innovate, right? Test hypotheses, state your hypotheses, test your hypotheses, have a portfolio. So I wanted to talk a little bit about Amazon's approach for innovating, right? So every project, every idea, every project at Amazon goes through these points. And while it sounds like it takes a lot of time, it really does. It's what I would call a go slow to go fast approach. They spend more time up front debating a concept and game than they do actually building the product and the service. So the first approach is this concept called narratives. So a narrative is a fully written document, oftentimes referred to as a 6-pager, that fully explains a concept or an idea to an audience for a given purpose, right? So there is no set format for a narrative. It depends on what concept, what your goal is for the audience. A couple of benefits for writing things out in narratives versus doing PowerPoint. So the first is it forces teams and individuals to work better together and make sure that they're actually communicating, right? They don't fly by on these topics. They get to clarity, which is both simplicity and completeness of thought. The other big advantage advantages of narratives is that when these narratives are presented to management, meetings start with 15 to 20 minutes of silence where the narratives get read. It's actually more demanding on the people being presented to because they have to read, they have to truly understand the topic at hand. And then they can have better conversations about it, make better decisions. So think about in your work, replacing PowerPoints with writing concepts out. Even if you do it just as an individual, trust me, you will understand what you are presenting so much better. The second thing that comes with a narrative, perfect, is called a future press release. So a future press release is an announcement about a new product, a new service, a new capability that you've explained in the narrative, right? You don't talk about it at the point of launch though. You talk about it at some point after launch, maybe a year or 2 years after launch, once you've achieved success with this new product. You're starting with the customer and you're working backwards. You're starting with the future and you're working backwards. The first thing you do in a future press release is you talk about, why did my customers love it? Of course, you start with the customer, right? Everything is about the customer, but get to really direct language on what exactly about your new product or your new service did customers love? What was the superpower of your new capability? The second part of the future press release might be about your metrics, or if you understand it well enough, what your business case might be, or the addressable market. The third piece of the future press release, I think, was really the magic. In the third section, we would talk about the issues, the problems, the challenges that had to be solved for in order to achieve this vision. We wouldn't talk about how we solve them because we haven't done the work yet. We just get them on paper, and so that people are starting to see these are the challenges that we have to solve. You give this future press release to one person in the organization, and you make sure that the organization knows, relative to this mission that's stated in the future press release, we all work for that person, right? We're trying to avoid escalation and bureaucracy so that we move and experiment faster. The third thing we do, next item, perfect, is we develop FAQs, which stands for frequently asked questions, right? And we do this from the start. Before we build anything, we start writing out frequently asked questions. And you do these from different points of view. of course, from the customer point of view, but maybe then from a partner's point of view, from sales, from legal, from engineering, from maintenance. Guess what happens if before you start building something, a team is thinking about, well, what questions might others have? Well, they start thinking about the issues, the risks, and the expectations management that they need to put in place with all those shareholders. They think about their project more clearly, and they can help keep it small. The fourth thing is about prototyping. Find the simplest way possible to test the concept that needs to be tested. Only build to that. Keep your prototypes as rough, as dirty, as simplistic as possible to collect the data to prove out or disprove your hypotheses, to experiment. Prototyping is key to keeping the speed in your agility. So again, Amazon talks about having a curious culture, a culture of writing. They don't do PowerPoint because PowerPoint dumbs you down. It's good for this, which is a speaker presenting to a topic, but it doesn't travel well, right? I always have to go along with the PowerPoint. You can't give it to somebody to read and to get. Think about, how do you write out your concepts before you invest, have better debate, use customer obsession and data to justify your positions, and think about it longer and harder before you start investing in new capabilities. Next slide. So I wanted to wrap up with just some summary points. We've covered a lot of territory pretty quickly. So here's some key points from what we've talked about today, the things you can learn from Amazon. Point one, first, it's everybody's job to understand the voice of the customer. It's not the UI team or the customer experience team or the digital team. Everybody needs to understand and be curious about the customer and what the customer's perspective is and care about the customer experience. Next point. Innovating can mean changing business traditions and being misunderstood. If you're truly changing traditions, business models, techniques, changing the status quo, oftentimes the current market, the current competitors, the press, others are not going to understand you and are going to think it's irresponsible and won't work. Be ready for that point of view. Third, be relentless. Think about metrics on everything, and metrics that point out where the imperfections are, where the noise, where the signal is, so that you can always be focusing on getting it better. You're seeking perfection in your operations. Fourth, everybody plays a role in getting to yes. It's not just the person who owns the project or owns the idea. Everybody in the organization needs to be a problem solver and help get to yes, instead of just pointing out all the easy reasons why it's no. And fifth and finally, you have to dedicate yourself to working in the future, being curious, reading, educating yourselves, especially getting opinions that don't confirm your own current beliefs. Those are the habits of working in the future, and are the habits of champions who think about things differently, recognize opportunities, and are able to advance on them. So again, I want to say thank you for the honor of getting to present with you today. I really appreciate the opportunity, and I think we've got some time for questions and answers.
Thank you, John Rossman. How are you doing? We have a great time listening to you, to your wonderful experience. So one thing that I stay with is stay curious. I love it. Really. Wonderful.
It's what? I'm sorry, can you say that again?
But it stays with what you say about the stay curious.
Perfect. Yeah, it really is like, it just, reading, especially reading and educating yourself about topics. They may seem a little technical, they may seem a little mundane, they may seem a little futuristic, but really be careful about the content you're consuming and dedicate yourself. You know, you always hear these terms, or at least in the States, we hear these terms about being a lifelong learner. That's what being a lifelong learner is about, is being curious about new topics and diving in deeper than just, you know, a magazine article. Like, actually get real books and real content and learn about something.
What about keep your prototype raw, dirty? Wow, that was wonderful.
Yeah, you know, one of my favorite stories around that is there's a movie about Ray Kroc, who invented McDonald's. And in the movie, they show how they just chalked out the restaurant and the flow, and they brought people in and they just mimicked what the flow of the restaurant was going to be, and they kept refining it and refining it. They didn't build anything until they had tested it in a really raw prototype effort. And I think that everybody likes to build the technology, build the app or whatever, and there's so many things you can do, from surveying customers to, you know, whiteboards and brown paper and drawing things out, to mimicking what the interactions could be, to really in a rough, fast, cheap manner prototype how something is going to happen.
Now we have like many questions for you. So we're going to start, if that's okay for you. Okay. It says, thank you, John. What is your perception of the reliability of social media for digital marketing and incrementing an audience? What is your uptake on email marketing?
Not necessarily my area of expertise, but obviously, like, you know, discovery, like discovering a product is a really tough problem for customers, right? You get inundated with so many things that you could do. And so I think, you know, having relevant, effective, multi-point touches with customers, and you want to talk about a process of rapid iteration and being data-driven to see what the effectiveness is. So it's obviously a big market. It's changed. Advertising has changed the press. It's changed media and everything. I think it's going to continue to change. Like the form factors, the apps that are popular are going to continue to change rapidly. And I would just say that's an area where I would say, like, no matter who the incumbents are today, there's opportunity for innovation there and everything.
Now we have, when a small business provides online consulting, how could we build trust to our potential customers?
Yeah, you know, trust is such a great topic. You know, so I go, well, what is trust? To me, what trust is being clear about the expectations that you set with somebody and then delivering against them, right? So you have to set explicit expectations and then deliver to it. And if you do that every single time, every single transaction, guess what the customer has? They trust you, right? They trust that you are going to do what you say. So regardless of what your business is, set great expectations with your customer and then meet or exceed those expectations. And if you do that every time, your customers are going to trust you. And that's really what operational excellence is about, is setting great expectations and then hitting those expectations every single time.
Questions. What about, it says, when will Amazon come to Panama? Amazon considers that its market is very small, probably. I don't know.
Yeah, you know, I think it is definitely, you know, winding its way down through South America, obviously making some big investments in Brazil and Mexico and some other markets. It's just a matter of time, right? And so I think that I'd be thinking about how to beat Amazon to the market before they get there. I think that there's a real opportunity in small developing markets like that to build the brand and to build the essence before a big guy like Amazon or Alibaba really come into it.
Panama buys a lot. With the Panamanians like to buy it a lot.
Good.
Yeah. Okay. Do you consider experimenting is equal to incremented cost?
Can you restate the question?
Do you consider experimental is equal to incremented or incrementing costs?
Yeah, I think that mean maybe incremental innovation, right? There, in general, you can break innovation down like what they call, I've heard it referred to as big I innovation versus small I innovation. Small I innovation, like incremental capabilities, most of those ideas and concepts come from operational excellence. Like, how do I reduce errors? How do I improve quality? How do I reduce costs? How do I improve hitting my customer expectation? Bezos has said that 80% of all Amazon innovations have come from operational excellence. I think the opportunity is for all of us to take more incremental innovations. Like, how do I remove that piece of friction for my customer? How do I decrease cycle times? Shortening cycle times is always a great way to innovate, and that changes lots of things in your organization and in a supply chain or in an ecosystem. So finding small ways to compress cycle times, improve quality, improve cost, like those are the incremental innovations that, when you're patient, then they lead to a completely new capability. So I think small I innovation is really the path in most cases.
Thank you, John. As a CEO, how might artificial intelligence and machine learning impact your industry and business model? What are the indicators that it's already underway, and how do we get started?
Yeah, so I think, artificial intelligence, machine learning, natural language processing, like all of these things, I think in general, like there's two interesting ways to think about it. And one is like automating capabilities. So think of that as like an autopilot. And the other is complementing humans, right? Think of that as like a co-pilot capability. And I think most opportunities for businesses are going to be kind of the co-pilot opportunity, where it's giving advice, giving a nudge, giving a recommendation to somebody who then does something with it, right? All of these things are about pattern recognition, using lots of data to recognize little patterns to then make a forecast, a probabilistic forecast about what's going to happen next, right? Do you say yes or do you say no to that loan application? Do you, do you order 1,000 items for inventory or 500 items for inventory? Like those are the little nudges or complements that machine learning. The way the recommendation I always give of how to get started is find a problem today in your business where if you probably have an expert that's been at it for 20 years or whatever, and if that person has a repeatable logic of like how they look at something to make their next recommendation, then that's probably a good situation for machine learning to be applied to, because there's a pattern there, right? But you need all the data in order to build the models, in order to see what that recommendation needs to be. So you need to be a data-rich organization in order to do that. Relative, to your competition, I would just, keep reading about them, and I would be reading about trying to find examples of where your competitors and others are applying machine learning. Again, that's that, being curious, figuring out the day one idea, and then placing a little experiment. You don't want to wait till you have to be able to do something. You want to be building capability, experimenting, understanding how it works, and then that lets you find the right problem, the right opportunity to really make an investment that impacts your business.
Another one, like many. Okay, please, what are your recommendations for this time of pandemic and to undertake?
Yeah, the pandemic, it's a travesty, first of all, right? Lots of people, lots of businesses being negatively impacted for it. So my first recommendation, take care of yourself, take care of your family, right? But I think beyond that, like from a business standpoint, what you've seen is like it's highly disruptive. And by disruptive, what I mean is that there are clear winners and there are clear and tragic losers, right? Those companies that have been innovating and investing ahead of time, those tend to be the companies that are winning in this time of disruption versus those that were tied to old models, who weren't innovating, who aren't technically literate, who weren't creating new paths to work with their customers, right? And so my advice is start with your customer, work backwards, figure out a new model to serve that customer. Maybe there's a new need depending upon kind of the intersection of the pandemic and your capability and your service. I've seen a lot of companies make, we use the word pivot a lot here, to make little pivots, little changes, using your same core capability or service to serve a customer in a new way. But you have to be patient with it, and all of these little steps still matter during a time of disruption like we're currently in.
Oh, marvelous. Okay, we have like another, okay. How we transfer FAQ into inputs that benefits the company? How do we evaluate what are the ideas from the FAQs that requires more priority?
So frequently asked questions, it's a great technique to create more conversation, both internal to a company, but also with your partners, right? And it makes a safe environment to ask all the maybe stupid, maybe sensitive questions that otherwise kind of get hidden to the end, and then they come up, right? So it's a great way to really identify the risks and then to manage expectations before they come risks. So, my number one recommendation is read the chapter, because I give a really good recipe for how to write FAQs. Really simple question, really direct answer, right? You don't be long-winded about it. Simple question, simple answer, have lots of them, make them available to the entire organization. Anybody involved in it should be able to read them, should be able to ask questions. The team gives answers, and it just creates a great dialogue, and it helps projects go so much better.
Here it says it's in Spanish, so I'm going to try to translate it, okay? What was the best strategy of Amazon to be a great company? What lessons that you learned want to talk about? And thank you for the best of wonderful presentation.
Thanks. Well, honestly, that question is what inspired me to write the book, because I learned so much. And I was there at a really interesting time, right? Early 2002 through late 2005, so about 4 years. Amazon wasn't the roaring success that it was today. Everybody was doubting it. The stock was flat. The stock was flat for a very long period of time, about 9 years. The stock was flat. But Jeff and the executive team operated the exact same way then as they do now, right? Same tone, same tenor, same principles, same beliefs. And so they really were just investing in the long term and using all of these little nuggets that I tried to capture and Think Like Amazon to apply into their work. And I think that's one of the greatest testaments about Amazon is they were operating the same way back then as they operate now. It's just a much bigger business, and they were patient and they let the market develop, and they never strayed away from their core beliefs.
Thank you so much. And let me tell you, when there are many questions right now, but now we have to go to the panel that we have with other members. And let me tell everyone to buy the book. Enjoy. Tell them what they are going to find in the book.
Well, find the book at Amazon. It comes in a hardback like this guy, or Kindle, nice. Or an audio version that is a really good listen. So any way you want to get it, you can get your content.
Perfect. Well, now I'm going to not let you go because I need you to stay there. Vamos a dar paso en este momento al panel de expertos con relación al tema cómo implementar una cultura Amazon en Panamá. How do we implement an Amazon culture in Panama? Así que queremos invitar de Panamá a Diego Eleta nuevamente y a Roberto Melo.
Hey, John.
Hey, Roberto.
It's a pleasure seeing you. Let's wait for Diego.
Diego.
I'm honored to have you guys both seen and John, thank you for being with us here in Panama. It's been a great pleasure and a great learning experience.
I hope next year we can do this in person. Wouldn't that be a tremendous hallmark? So
that would be fabulous. Let's hope so. A couple of things. I'm going to say one thing in Spanish because I want to make this highly interactive. I want the audience to help us out a little bit. So I'll tell them in Spanish first, and then we'll go. So my idea is that we can have a little bit of an open chat on different topics, taking information from the audience, from Diego's experience, and from what you just said, then applying it to Panama. So un poquito a la audiencia, como estamos aquí y para que está John y Diego al mismo tiempo, sí quiero que me ayuden con las preguntas en el question answer para pensar un poco sobre cómo aquí en Panamá nosotros podemos hacer modelos. Uno, como Amazon, y dos, aprender de lo que Diego nos contó primero, de su experiencia, de comenzar desde cero y de volver a hacerlo porque no le dio miedo hacerlo de nuevo. Así que, with that in mind, ayúdame con las preguntas. John, I want to cover a few topics first, and then maybe we'll ask each other questions and maybe share some thoughts. Diego can jump in also. I'll first start with
Please,
this.
Diego.
Here. Yeah, let's start with some idea first of, Panama is a small country. I mean, but COVID has changed a lot of the rules of the world. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're a small country or a big country. So the first question that I wanted to ask you is, what do you think are the opportunities now that COVID has changed some of these things for a country like Panama? Where do you think we should go as a country potentially, not as an individual company? And then the other thing is, what items of leadership do you think we could use to do that?
Well, I think infrastructure is always such a national asset and a critical asset to creating an environment of innovation, right? So whether that's supply chain and logistics infrastructure, whether that's telecom and internet infrastructure, whether that's education infrastructure, and all of those are really critical that let others innovate on top of that core infrastructure. I don't know if everybody knows this, but Bezos has another company. It's called Blue Origin, and they're competing with SpaceX to kind of create the infrastructure to space. And the really interesting thing that Jeff says about that is he goes, I was able to take advantage of the great transportation and logistics infrastructure that already existed in the US to build Amazon. I'm trying to build the infrastructure for the next generation of space innovators, right? I think that's one notion, a really noble way to think about it. And so the things I think about are, how do you build core infrastructure that then lets others innovate on top of it?
Great.
If I can complement to that and bring that, should I answer in English or in Spanish, by the way? I don't know what language to use.
Only if you need me to understand it, Diego.
No,
you could decide either you want to. Okay. But yeah, probably we have translation going on. So.
You can clue me in later, okay?
No. I'll do it in English so you can stay within the conversation. I'm hoping our audience can understand. I was just going to compliment what John was saying with specific Panamanian, because obviously John does not know the Panamanian context. And I think here in Panama, when we look at that infrastructure that you just talked about, I think we have important opportunities, not just because of COVID. I see it a little bit more broadly. I think the geopolitical changes that are occurring nowadays in the world is driving, and part of it because of COVID, it's driving a lot of companies and nations to rethink their bets on single, let's say, origin for their manufacturing and distribution. And I think Panama is very well positioned to take advantage of that, let's say, de-risking that these corporations are doing and nearshoring some of their operations. So Panama, for example, for a company even like Amazon, like if I want to have a regional distribution hub in the region, Panama is a great opportunity for Amazon. But I mean, that's just because you're here. But I mean, if you look at let's say pharmaceuticals, that's a good opportunity, and many other light manufacturing, because we're not a huge manufacturing center, but we can start with low manufacturing, with logistics where we have an advantage. So I think there's great opportunities for Panama in our infrastructure to develop and take advantage of these global changes that are occurring in part because of COVID, but also because, as we know, I don't want to get into politics, but we've seen how political changes are affecting all countries, even let's say old kind of stable countries are changing. So now people are beginning to think, well, maybe I won't want to rely on just one place to have my manufacturing, my logistics, or whatever. So I think there's a big one. The other one, education, you mentioned. We have, as you know, Roberto, a huge deficit in Panama, and unfortunately, we have been ignoring it for forever. And I'm not gonna dwell on it too much because you and I think all our audience knows that. But I think investing in our people is probably the best use of our money that we can do in order to climb, because these are like a cake. I always talk about these things like a cake, so you have the crust of the cake, and then you do the layer, and then you do the frosting, and then the other layer. And one of the basic ones, besides physical infrastructure, is your human infrastructure. So I think in Panama we can do what John is saying very specifically to address those opportunities.
That's pretty interesting, Diego and John. So you're betting on the topic of logistics and infrastructure as being important in Panama, and then secondly, looking for that opportunity to bet on. But I wanted to take on that and go to a topic. We have a lot of small businesses here today. That they're not that large. I mean, so the question that I wanted to ask you is, Amazon is not only a big company, is also a company of many small companies. So why don't you tell us a bit about that ecosystem? I mean, how did Amazon, or how does Amazon help all these SMBs, and what is in for them, or maybe for our audience?
Yeah, so I think the biggest example of that, not the only example, but the biggest example of that with Amazon is the marketplace business, right? So that's third parties selling at Amazon.com. I think there's over 3 million sellers on the platform today. A lot of those are obviously small mom and pop style businesses. And what it provides them is an opportunity to reach customers that they could have never reached before, and to leverage Amazon capability so that they don't have to build that capability or worry about that capability as much. So, for example, as a marketplace seller, you can use Amazon logistics and fulfillment centers. That's called FBA, Fulfillment by Amazon, right? And so I think that mindset really, we called it a platform strategy at Amazon, which is building capabilities that you both used internally, but also let others use it, and to participate in kind of the flywheel, the virtuous cycle of creating selection, in this case, things to sell that brings in customers, that then floats the whole flywheel, creates demand and business for the third-party sellers, and so more come on, and the flywheel goes around, right? And that just took patience in order to build with a real vision and a great trusted customer experience, right? Regardless of who you were buying from, you knew the standard level was going to be met if you bought it through Amazon, whether it was Amazon the seller or a third party as a seller. So that's the biggest example of how Amazon has really created hundreds of thousands of small businesses and let them flourish.
I want to add two things. One about Amazon itself, and then another one going back to Panama. I think another huge one that I don't know if you mentioned, I didn't hear you mention it, is AWS. And the AWS, and it's not the only cloud provider, of course, but AWS and Azure and some of the others allow the same concept that you just mentioned of apalancar, leverage, of leveraging the investments of large companies like Amazon itself, and have much lower cost of entry for computing power that you wouldn't have ever been able to pay as a small company in a place like Panama. So that's on the Amazon side. Going and then flipping on the other, the flip side of that, which has to do with the Panama side of what you mentioned as the first example, which is the marketplace. There's, I think, another opportunity in Panama on the marketplace side, because because Amazon is not present locally in Panama. We import from abroad. I mean, obviously, if you are a Panamanian seller, your obvious first market is your local market, which is Panama. So I think, and there's a couple of startups actually, and some that are, let's say, recent startups, or not started like ASAP, for example, who are providing marketplaces, obviously not as sophisticated as Amazon, but they're local, and they all, once again, leverage, in the case of ASAP, the messaging system that they have. ASAP is like a messaging service, John. So they leverage their own messaging service and say, okay, I can set up a marketplace, put my store there, and then leverage the delivery of the local delivery company in this case. But so locally, you also have the opportunity to emulate some of the things you've seen abroad and apply it on a smaller scale here in Panama.
That's great.
That's a pretty neat idea, Diego. I wanted to touch on another topic is we see startups creating marketplaces in Panama. That's interesting. But the other question that I wanted to ask you is, in some of our meetings in Escala, we have met business owners from South America that are actually selling in Amazon. So they're selling niche products in Amazon. So maybe perhaps that could be an opportunity also, which is using Amazon as a platform to sell from Panama, but to a larger market. So what are your thoughts, maybe also for Diego, on that topic?
Well, I think it's a massive opportunity. You've seen China and Vietnamese sellers really take a hold of that opportunity and do that. And I think that's an opportunity for a lot of other markets too.
Yeah, I think that's the let's say the obvious opportunity, because you cannot leverage Amazon for the local market, but you definitely can leverage it for the worldwide market. My recommendation to our audience and to Panama in general is that you have to recognize who you are, what your strengths are, and what your strengths are not. And we're not a huge volume, low cost producer. We're not China or Vietnam or anything like that. So if I were to start a new business in Panama, I would look for a niche market that is not cornered by, let's say, Asian manufacturers, so that I can differentiate myself and I can be one of one if possible, or one of two sellers in Amazon and not one of 45. Because if I'm the 45th and the other 44 are Chinese, I'm not gonna make it. But if I'm the one of one, because I sell or one of four, and my other competitors are other 4 Panamanians are in the same playing field that I am, then I have a chance for success. And obviously I need to differentiate my product offering from all the other ones in the world. So the key here is to realize what is that thing that can make me different from the other people, and then go to Amazon and leverage that.
Said another way is, it has to be a great offer, right? It doesn't matter what you think. It depends on what a customer thinks of your offer. So unique product, a price point that makes sense, convenience, and the ability for service becomes a bigger and bigger factor. So you really do have to think about how to take your core capabilities and create an offer, a product with a proposal to sell it. It has to be competitive.
So John, summarizing from your presentation and taking on to Diego's idea, you have to understand your customer, understand what the customer needs. And then also from Diego's perspective, it needs to be some form of niche product oriented on solving a specific opportunistic need. But there is opportunity certainly for business owners to potentially sell in the U.S. So I want to move to another topic here. There's a few questions here and something else that I know Amazon likes a lot, and I'm very curious for you to tell us about it, John. But I I like your product in that category, which is Internet of Things. So I wanted to ask you two things about Internet of Things. The first thing is you have the Alexa product line and the whole ecosystem about controlling things with voice and so forth. So I wanted to get your thoughts on the future of where do you see this going? What's next for Internet of Things?
So I'll talk about it from two notions. I think voice as an interface, right? That's essentially what these smart speakers and agents do. I think we are at the very beginning. We're in the first inning of these capabilities, and it's going to be a very long path. And I would say, like, in 20 years, we're going to look back and laugh at how it worked today. I mean, we are just going to laugh our heads off about, how many times you had to say, like, hey, Alexa, blah, like, you get misunderstood and it pulls up a dumb answer, and everything, right? So I think it's going to, if you think it's made progress in the past 5 years, I don't think it's going to be anything like the progress over the next 20 years. And I think secondly is I'm excited about applying that not so much in consumer scenarios, but in business and industrial scenarios, right? There's lots of scenarios where you can think about, I'm in a management team meeting and I can't recall, like, oh, what was my sales for this product to that market last year? Being able to ask a question like that, right? And it's like a participant in your meeting being able to give you answers that today, like, oh, we'll take that away. They'll come back next week with the answer. Like, that slows you down. So that real-time kind of intelligence service, I think impacting business is going to be really interesting. And then there's another set of scenarios where people are in situations where voice is just a better interface, right? So think about a machine worker or an industrial worker where their hands are busy, maybe they have gloves on, something like that, and the ability, like, hey, give me the instruction for this machine, tell me how to, do something, right? And so I think that those types of scenarios, we're just starting on those today, and voice is going to be a great interface. And then I think the other thing relative to Amazon is Alexa is a really interesting project for them, but the real business for them is in AWS, right? So that's their cloud. Diego mentioned their cloud computing division. They have a lot of different technologies, tools, and approaches for building the ecosystem of people that are connecting all types of situations, devices, data together to be able to solve interesting problems. And all of that's about generating cloud computing consumption, which is what drives the AWS business. So Amazon's interested in it for at least two reasons. And then the third reason is really for their own businesses, right? How they do fulfillment, how they protect their workers, how they use sensors to really improve their operations. That's kind of the third part of their own internal IoT strategy.
And once again, to complement what John's saying, I think the world we live in today provides small businesses huge opportunities because, once again, a platform like AWS and like Alexa in particular, that platform, you could never have developed that as a small business before. Now you can leverage that platform and all the scripting capabilities, the Internet of Things, the artificial intelligence. You can leverage all that into your own product where you just, you're the icing in that huge cake. The big challenge there is that obviously you're one of many who can do that. So how, once again, going back to the previous one, how do I differentiate myself to make myself seen? Because nowadays the problem with the internet is it's so huge. You can see people from the YouTube videos.
That's the discovery problem, right?
Yeah, exactly. The YouTube video issue. I mean, like, when you get discovered, you sell, people become millionaires, but it's 1 out of a million who becomes a millionaire. The other 999,000, nobody ever sees their videos.
That's right.
Nobody makes money out of it. So that's really, like, the key now is not being able to create all that really difficult platform that Amazon is putting at our disposal, and Google and Azure and many others. But how do you differentiate your offering once you do that? And that's really, really the key. And it goes back to the original question that we're talking about digital advertising, getting yourself out there. How do you accomplish that? That's really, and with a small country like ours, that makes it a bigger challenge sometimes.
That's interesting, Diego and John. I mean, what you're saying is essentially there's great opportunity in Internet of Things, and perhaps Internet of Things apply to certain areas. So I will add maybe to that thought areas like logistics, where Panama might have a special consideration. So are there opportunities to potentially take a niche area like that and develop Internet of Things projects? It was curious, by the way. We had a pitch competition or a business plan competition, really startups, but we saw two very interesting ones, which were Internet of Things applied to agriculture, which pretty interesting applications. So I think for our audience, that could spark ideas of things to explore. I mean, it doesn't necessarily has to be that you need to know about technology. Perhaps you know about a particular area like logistics or agriculture, and then you can develop a solution for that area using Amazon's platform like AWS. So, and it doesn't cost that much because really you pay for what you use, which is the interesting model. So that's interesting. I wanted to kind of stay on the idea of Diego brought it, but the idea of bets and how often does Amazon go about betting on an idea? What percentage of your people are thinking about new things? I'm curious, what percentage of Amazon people are thinking about, we have to develop the next thing versus your core business?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So if you think about kind of essentially two sets of employees at Amazon, right? There's kind of the corporate employees, and then there's the hundreds of thousands that work in fulfillment centers and customer service centers, right? Call that operations, right? So, and that's, I think there's like 1.2 million Amazon employees, something like that today. The vast majority are in that operations function. But if you look at corporate, which is business people, a lot of technology and engineering people, the vast majority of those have a role in both current operations and in innovating and coming up with ideas and justifying those ideas. I talked about that process in my keynote, which is that start with the customer and work backwards. Narratives, future press release, FAQs, low fidelity prototyping. That's the process every idea goes through, regardless of where it comes from, so that they rationalize the idea, because they can't do them all, right? So that's, I guess my answer is the vast majority of people at Amazon that work in corporate are somehow involved in both delivering for today, operations, and building the future, working in the future.
That's interesting. I wanted to see Diego's perspective on this, put it in contrast in Panama, and which is, do you any of both of you think that the time frame to do this testing, you said that failing quickly is sometimes important, but the time frame, because of COVID, is that time frame to do that changed? Do you have to do it more rapidly now? Is it different?
I believe it kind of depends on what business you're in. There's a one size fits all. I think in certain industries, I believe you're right. There's others that the time frame hasn't. I think COVID to a large degree has changed the way we look at things, and sometimes the speed of things. But once again, I think we need to kind of like compartmentalize it a little bit more before we can about the speed of things. But I think not just COVID. I think in general that cycle is definitely getting shorter, and definitely technology is super short. And part of the reason for that, once it goes back to the previous conversation, is because we have all these tools. We can experiment at a lower cost, so there's more experimentation going on, and these tools also allow us just to achieve results quicker. So that just causes the whole cycle to move faster. But once again, that's mostly in technology. There's other things around that require you to be, to do things at the pace you need to do it. Right now, the problem sometimes is the expectations do not match the requirements. I mean, one of the biggest things in COVID itself, for example, is that we all want the vaccine tomorrow. It's like, well, you do have to test it on the people. You have to make sure that, the 2 weeks go by. Like, there's just some things that need to go at the pace they need to go. So there's a changing expectation, but there's some things that can go faster, some things that, unfortunately can't.
So, one of the things I think that this pandemic has shown us is how fast we can move when we don't come up with excuses, right? And I think that's something that, at least here in the States, like, you see so many businesses, they kind of hedge on, like, do I really want to make change? It's hard. I might upset somebody. My people aren't comfortable with it. Well, with the pandemic, you just like, doesn't matter. Like, I have to do it, and everything, right? And I think that mindset of, oh, we can move fast. We can iterate and learn something and launch a new product and a new service. I think that mindset is going to really impact management, and it's like, no more excuses. We have to innovate. We have to innovate faster. That's, I'm hoping, is one of the great lasting impacts of the pandemic, is like, there is no choice. It's not like, oh, we can kind of take our time. Like, no, we have to move now. We have to move fast. And I hope that has a lasting impact.
That's interesting. Let's take a couple of questions from the audience. I think we have covered a lot of what they're asking in some of our questions, but let's see if there's a couple here that we could. There's one, and there's two that I'm going to put together as a single question. I think Juan Del Valle is asking us about, is there anything special that while you were Amazon, you guys did to be able to foster the culture of innovation? I mean, is there anything, because a lot of large corporations.
Look, there were at least 50.
You have to read the book.
There's at least 50. I think the quick answer on that is the leadership principles were really instrumental. When I was there, there's 14 leadership principles. They weren't written down, they weren't codified, but we were practicing them every day. Like, well, how do we think about this? How do we act on it? How do we hold each other accountable? How do we make decisions and think in these circumstances? And that led to the leadership principles. And the leadership principles, which I write about in here, are key to scaling out the organization. Because if we all have a normal expectation of each other, if we all make decisions in the same way, if we all prioritize from the customer and work backwards, guess what? We're all going to be able to get things done a lot better.
One thing that you mentioned in your talk that reminded me of Cableon, because my talk was about my previous company also. It was about the getting to yes. And there's a in my personal meetings, but it was all throughout the company. We always said, never tell us why not, but how yes. I mean, I'm translating roughly, but it's not, it's not everybody can tell me why we can't do this.
Right.
Tell me how we can do it.
Right.
And that principle is one of the key drivers of the success that we had in I think in Cableonda over and to overcome obstacles, because we're always gonna have them, and I think I love that when you said it, because we never, like you said, we never had none of these things written down.
Right.
But the sense of urgency, we didn't have the relentless, but the concept of urgency is another key principle that you need to apply. In Spanish, you say "No dejes para mañana lo que puedas hacer hoy." That is a saying that it definitely applied to the success of Cableonda, and I'm sure it's the same at things that you can extrapolate to a business of one. You don't need to be a large company.
That's right.
I wanted to use the same question, talk about big organizations. And now Diego has told us about his personal story of now he's an entrepreneur again. So back to number one. But what would you say as an entrepreneur are the traits that you need to get to yes, because the idea is how do you get to that yes to the first customer or maybe your first investor? What traits would you see? I mean, and Diego has done this a few times already. And John, looking at it from the perspective of, a lot of these individuals later on become entrepreneurs too, that are in a large organization. So what traits do you think are most important when you're back to square zero, starting from nothing? What would that be?
You asking me that?
Yeah, well, I want both of your opinions. Yeah.
I think it's, I mean, there's no one thing. The best entrepreneurs are multifaceted individuals, right? And that's kind of what helps make the whole thing go. But I think key is like being able to state a vision and make it interesting for others, right? You have to bring others along with you, right? Jeff Bezos is one of the best storytellers that we've ever seen in business. His writing, especially his shareholder letters, are him telling that story. And so I think that ability to be a great, consistent simplifier and communicator is one of the hidden attributes of great entrepreneurs.
Let me compliment that. I agree 100% with what you're saying. And I'm thinking of my cousin Guillermo when because I myself tend to be more of an operations type person to make things happen. But before that, you need to have the vision. And one of the keys, because you have to combine two things, is having the vision, believing the vision, and then selling the vision. And you can't do the last one without the first two. And
right.
And I look at the recent real estate development was very, very difficult to accomplish. And I mean, like in my mind, I would never take that risk myself, But if somebody else can believe it so much themselves, that vision that they have, that then they can go ahead and sell it to other people and then make it happen. And those people many times are not the people who can they're the operational people who actually make it actually happen. They sell it to the people who can make it. Some people can combine all these, but it's very, very hard to find somebody with all those skills at once. But you have to start with that first one, and that's an attribute that not everybody has. And then
That's right.
Different one. Now changing subject because this is not something I mentioned, but that I find many entrepreneurs is they're kind of stubborn. Like kind of like focused. Or I mean, I say stubborn, focused. That pursuit of that objective. I think it's another trait that I would say is shared by a lot of successful entrepreneurs.
Yeah, that's fabulous. I think Alejandra showing up is meaning that we're almost out of time. Summarizing, I think the two key points that you said is one, you gotta get people to fall in love with your idea. So you gotta sell your vision, sell others, sell your stuff, sell your customers. But then Diego says at the same time is that you need to know how to build a team and when you need to bring people to execute, and then also maintain focus on getting to the end. So it's been wonderful to listen to you both and to share the stage to share some thoughts about the future and about Amazon and about Panama and that applied to Panama. It's been wonderful.
And I would just like to remind everybody, it's like, this isn't about Amazon, it's about you, right? And what can you take from all of these learnings and discussions to apply into your own business and stuff, right? So.
Absolutely. I think we have a lot of food for thought. Thank you both. I think, Diego, fabulous idea. It was inspiring for a lot of the entrepreneurs in the audience. So a lot of them are writing to me saying that they're going to go tell their staff now after they leave the conference about your story. So thank you for sharing with them because it inspires them. And John, I hope that you can make it to Panama soon. And I think a lot of people in the audience are saying, we hope that you can help us someday bring Amazon to Panama as well. So we're waiting. But
that may be above my pay grade, but yeah.
Great.
Here you go. Real pleasure meeting you. Thanks for the
nice to meet you,
conversation.
John. And thank you. Gracias, Roberto.
Yeah, well, Alejandra, you have to say thanks a lot to you both. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Qué excelente panel y qué cantidad de información hemos recibido en estos minutos, que fue intenso, fue muy intenso. Bueno, ahora queremos anunciar que los ganadores, los cinco finalistas van a ser anunciados en unos minutos, así que les pedimos que esperen, que ya pronto viene esa información. Nuestra siguiente conferencista es Cristina Di Giacomo. Es la primera filósofa industrial del mundo, autora del libro Wise Up at Work. Trabaja con ejecutivos y emprendedores para enseñarles ideas y conceptos de los mejores pensadores de todos los tiempos, para que cultiven sus mentes, administren con calma y superen obstáculos y lideren el camino. La conferencia de Cristina Di Giacomo es ¿cuál es el secreto para liderar tiempos de crisis? What is the secret leading in times of crisis? Welcome, Cristina Di Giacomo. Ya Cristina va a estar con nosotros y les recordamos que en breves minutos vamos a estar anunciando a los 5 finalistas de la competencia de emprendedores. Hubo una semifinal muy fuerte, muy grande, con mucha información, con grandes proyectos, así que tenemos el día de hoy ya la información de los 5 finalistas de esa competencia que se dio el fin de semana pasado. Ya saben, pronto estaremos con esa información, quédense ahí. Ya vamos con Cristina Di Giacomo.